Test, test, test. Good evening, everybody. My name is Eric Davis. I'm the Executive Director. We're going to get started right at 5:30. So we have here. If you need a glass of water, we have water in the back as well. So use these 10 minutes to get ready, and then we'll be right back and get this started. Thank you. All right, welcome everybody. What a fun night we've got tonight. Thank you for coming out. My name's Eric Davis. I'm the Executive Director of TV Santa Barbara, and it's neat to see so many of you here in the audience live. Couple things. We are videotaping this event, so we will tell you more about the video that comes out later, but let's go ahead and get started. A few news and notes and announcements and thank yous from me, and then we'll kick off with the two candidate forums tonight. This is a special year for TV Santa Barbara as we celebrate 50 years as the Community Access Center for the Santa Barbara region. And thank you again for tuning in tonight. I just want to say thank you to Jerry and Josh and Hap. I know how much you put into this, and it means a lot to the community to have these important conversations. A big thank you to the TV Santa Barbara team for making this happen. Thank you so much. And to Sylvia Uribe and Enoch, who provide Spanish language translation for you in the audience tonight. And the rebroadcast that we will air on community television will now include a Spanish language version of this candidate form, in addition to the multilingual closed captioning, which is a valuable feature of TV Santa Barbara. Community television provides a platform for local voices and perspectives to be heard, and tonight is a perfect example of that. It allows for the sharing of information, news, and events that are relevant to our local community. Community television also promotes diversity and inclusivity by showcasing a wide variety of programming that may not be represented in the mainstream media. And candidate forums like tonight provide an opportunity for voters to hear directly from the candidates about their platforms, their priorities, and plans for the city. These forums allow for a public discussion of key issues facing Santa Barbara. They promote transparency and help educate voters by providing them with the information they need to make informed decisions at the polls. City Council candidate forums also play a crucial role in promoting democracy, civic engagement, and informed decision-making, and we are honored to bring them to you tonight. It is critical that we preserve community television and operations like TV Santa Barbara that lift up local voices and air programming that is most relevant to the lives of our neighbors and our families. And I am proud to say that the City of Santa Barbara has been a partner of community television since its very inception in 1975, and we are grateful for your continued support. And on behalf of the community, I would like to express our gratitude to the candidates for your dedication, for your commitment to serving our city. Your willingness to step up and run for City Council demonstrates your passion for making a positive impact on Santa Barbara, and we say thank you. We appreciate the time and effort you put into your campaigns and the important issues that you are advocating for. Thank you for your willingness to listen to the concerns of our residents and for your willingness to work towards solutions that will benefit our beautiful city. Your leadership and vision are essential for the future of our community, and we are grateful for your willingness to run and serve. So best of luck in your election process, and thank you again for joining us here tonight. And now I get to turn it over to Josh and Jerry. Take it away.
Thank you, Eric, and good evening, everyone. Welcome to the first, count it, first Santa Barbara City Council election forums of the 2024 campaign season. I'm Jerry Roberts. This is my colleague, Josh Molina, and we'll be co-moderating both of tonight's discussions. And we want to second the motion to thank Sylvia Uribe, who will be providing our Spanish language translation. We're going to start in just a minute by hearing from the major candidates from District 1, and then we'll take a little break after that's done, and we'll move on to the contenders in District 3. Tonight's forum is co-sponsored by Newsmakers, the Santa Barbara Talks podcast, and by our host, of course, TV Santa Barbara, which is live streaming the event, which most of you probably know because you figured it out. Josh?
Thanks, Jerry. It's always a pleasure to be able to do something like this with you. Okay, before we get going, before we introduce the candidates, I want to kind of lay a little bit of the groundwork of how things are going to work. Our purpose is to give the candidates an opportunity to state their views on the major issues facing Santa Barbara. We also hope to draw out some key differences and distinctions between the candidates to help voters be informed so they can make the correct choice on election day. So we're going to keep the discussion a little loose in order to take time for follow-up questions as well as responses from the candidates to each other. Each forum will last about an hour. We've asked the candidates to limit their answers to no more than 2 minutes, and each of them will also have the opportunity for a closing statement of 2 minutes. And for the live audience here, we're asking you to please hold your applause until the end. TVSB, obviously we're live streaming and we want to sort of keep on pace with our schedule. Jerry?
Okay, without further ado, let me introduce our candidates. First, incumbent council member Alejandra Gutierrez, and the challenger, Wendy Santamaria. Thank you both very much for coming and for running. It's not easy to put yourself out there, and I always want to say that I appreciate it. Alejandra, let me start with you and ask, why should voters support you for another term? Why do you deserve re-election?
I believe I deserve re-election because I have experience being on council. I was born and raised here. I have skin in the game. My roots are here in this city, mainly in District 1. I want to finish what I started. I believe that the city is in a very critical position. We are very divided, especially with the housing crisis issue that we have going on and the economy being the way that it is. And it's important to bring community together. And I've been doing that for the last 2 decades with the work that I've been doing, the volunteer work, and being part of the larger community. The main thing that I've done is bridging communities together.
All right, thank you. And Wendy, what would you do differently that would make you a more effective representative? Why should voters make a change?
Thank you, Jerry, for that question. The number one difference that there would be were I on the city council is I would show up. I would be with community. I would be present at the important meetings to appoint our city administrator. I would be there for all of the budget discussions. I would be present because yes, we need a voice for our community, but it would be nice to have a local voice, yes, but we need a voice, period. And we need someone that is willing to show up, that actually answers back to their constituents, because it's true. We are in an immense crisis and we need to take truly bold action to get our city on the right path. And that means bringing a community of policy experts, city staff, current city council members, and working families to make sure that our priorities are with helping our working families thrive. We can't lose sight of what we need on the city. The city needs to address its issues of floods. It needs to address the issues of power outages. We have, of course, yes, the housing crisis. We need to make sure essential workers have good wages and benefits. So the one difference is that I have proven myself for nearly a decade in this community of being at the grassroots level. I'm not a politician and never saw myself in this position, but at the end of the day, I have been pushed to run for this position because we need someone who's going to show up and have unwavering support for working families in the city.
Thank you.
Okay, big surprise. A lot of our questions are going to have to do with housing, so we're going to start there. We obviously are experiencing a major housing crisis in Santa Barbara. So before we dig deep into the real specific questions about housing, I'm wondering if you could talk just a little bit about your own personal housing situation and tell us how it informs the decisions you will make on council. Are you a renter? Are you a homeowner? What is your personal experience? Because obviously so much of this issue affects people who rent, it affects property owners. Where are you coming from? Tell us your personal sort of housing story. And we'll start with you, Wendy.
Thank you, Josh. So I'm a renter. I'm a working class tenant. I live paycheck to paycheck because my rents are really high. My rent is about to go up to $5,000. I live in a home on the east side with my family, and including my sister who's here today. And I rent from a small mom and pop landlord. And the reason I want to mention that is because in my years renting in being a tenant in Santa Barbara, there has been a clear distinction between my experience between renting from a big corporate landlord who you often don't see, who are often not responsive when things are going wrong in your housing unit, when it's not safe and habitable. There's a big difference between corporate landlords that are absent versus our mom and pops who probably just live up the street, right? Like, this is their generational wealth. This home means something to them. It's not just a number. And they take care of their units. And so whenever I can, I try to rent from a mom and pop. And I mention that because this would inform my policy decisions in a way that we need to make sure that we don't just cast blanket solutions. We can't say all landlords are bad or all landlords are good. That's not the way to do things. There needs to be some nuance in this, and we need to make sure that any ordinances that we place, that there is some wiggle room and some flexibility to account for economic hardships or other things that our small mom and pop landlords face.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Gutierrez.
Thank you, Josh, for that question. I'm a renter as well. I also live paycheck to paycheck, working class. But I also come from a district where there's a lot of Latino mom and pops. And the reason that I have never supported a rent cap, it's because I understand what rent control will do to mom and pops. And I'm glad to hear that my opponent has changed her views in making housing providers, make them seem like they're villains in the community. And there's a huge difference between corporations and mom and pops. And the reason that in my district you have a lot of mom and pops that actually house the working class, especially workers that don't have a social security, that don't have good credit, there's multi-generation of individuals living in one household to be able to pay the rent. And that's why I have supported for tenant protections. I have been very mindful to create a balanced solution for the housing situation we have in the city.
Just one quick follow-up, Councilmember Gutierrez. You say you're a renter. Do you rent from a family member? Do you rent from just the open market? Because I just want to clarify that, because I know that comes up in the context of this race.
Yeah, I'm very proud to say that I rent from my parents. They have worked very hard to create their generational wealth from owning a second home.
Yeah, great, thank you. Jerry?
I'm glad you mentioned rent caps and rent control, because we want to dig in on that issue a little bit. As you know, Prop 33 on the November ballot could have a big effect on rent control throughout California by lifting the so-called Costa-Hawkins law, which has really restricted rent control for many years. Let me ask both of you, what is your position on Proposition 33? And if your position prevails in November, what impact do you see it having on Santa Barbara? Alejandra, you want to take that one first?
I'm definitely against it, especially when I really want to protect those individuals that have been sacrificing a lot to live here and be able to own a property. Right now, a lot of the people that are pushing the rent control issue, if this law goes in effect, it will definitely affect the small landlords, the mom and pops, because now they will be part of that rent control. They will not be excluded.
Thank you. Wendy?
Let me make sure my mic is on. Thank you for that question, Jerry. I do differ from Ms. Gutierrez here in that I would support it, and let me tell you why. So Prop 33, what it would do is, like we said, it eliminates Costa-Hawkins, which is the exemption for rent stabilization ordinances for single-family homes owned by actual people, not corporations, condos, and the big one, units built in the last 15 years. So the reason that I would vote yes on Prop 33 is because we can locally still create exemptions for our mom and pops, because a lot of our mom and pops don't have the capital that these big corporations have to be able to not need to raise the rents as much. So in the housing reform package that our campaign is proposing, there is an element of the rent board, and the rent board would be the avenue where small mom and pops could come and seek exemptions. And we need to make sure that that's possible, because we need to be flexible. But the reason why I would support Prop 33 is we need to include the latest buildings, the latest housing units that enter the market. Those also we need some sort of cap on those rents. Otherwise, we're just going to keep seeing market rate units entering the market, and that doesn't help our workforce. The only ones that can afford $6,000 apartments are, tech employees from Silicon Valley who come to our beautiful city. So yes, I would support it, but I would make sure that locally we implement some measures to protect our mom and pops who are going through economic hardship.
Thanks for that answer. Another question about tenants and renting. When landlords evict tenants in order to renovate a property, should tenants have a guaranteed right to return, and under what conditions should there be a limit on the rent increase? Alejandra?
That's a really good question. I do support tenants being able to come back to their homes that were rent evicted. I don't support a rent cap. I voted on the rent eviction, the just cause rent eviction, except for the rent cap. Just like there is bad landlords, there's also bad tenants, and I think that we should, again, be fair across the board. But yeah, I supported with my vote for the right to come back to your unit.
Wendy?
I was proud to work on the ordinance that Ms. Gutierrez mentioned, and we were successful in passing an anti-harassment ordinance and a right to return. And so I'm happy to say that the city already includes that, but like Ms. Gutierrez mentioned, we failed to include a cap upon return. And let me tell you why that's the big change that I would make on the city council. When a landlord renovates their apartment, especially a corporate landlord, we're not talking mom and pops here. Let's talk about the real issue, which are the corporations. Corporations are neglecting their buildings. They literally will not update things for decades. I have tenants telling me, hey, 20, 30 years, my carpet has not been changed. These are safety hazards, and it's not the fault of the tenant that a landlord has neglected their investment property. So I would want to make sure that we do have a cap upon return. I was successful also in working with a coalition with Goleta City Council, where we also passed the cap we did pass the cap upon return in Goleta, and that was only to 10%, to the state's price gouging cap on rent. So that was what we were asking for at the city council, nothing less than what the state already says, but unfortunately our current city council failed to pass that provision in the ordinance, and were I on the city council, I would make sure that we bring back a cap upon return, because tenants deserve the opportunity to come back at a reasonable rate for a safe and stable home.
All right, thank you. One last question related. What percentage of new housing planned for the Macy's site at La Cumbre Plaza should be inclusionary? Alejandra?
That's a good question. There's already state policies, and I think the city also has that 10% inclusion. That is a big project, and I think it's first of its kind in the city, and I think my colleagues and I and city staff are still trying to figure out a good balance for a project like that in the city. But that project is an example of what developers will build with according to state law. Recently we spoke in the city council about my colleagues, Councilmember Jordan and Councilmember Friedman talked about bringing a memo to the developers to negotiate to come to common terms in providing more of affordable housing, and where that building would better serve the needs of that community and really not disturb so much the infrastructure and even impacts to the schools. So it's a newly project, so we're trying to figure it out as we go.
All right, Wendy?
Thank you, Jerry. The projects like La Cumbres and even Paseo Nuevos, these big projects, we need to make sure that the majority of those units are inclusionary and the majority are dedicated for workforce housing, affordable, truly affordable workforce housing. The folks that we need to house, the crisis that is felt the most by are the people who keep the city running. So I would want to advocate for as many of these units to be included, and we do need to take into account impacts to water supply, impacts to waste disposal, traffic. We need to make sure that these projects are built along existing public transit routes already. We need to reduce the reliance on cars, and we need to make sure that the majority of these units are within reach for our working class community.
All right, let me just press a little bit on that. Give me a number. I mean, it's 10% is required. What's the right number? Is it 15? Is it 20? Or is it more than 10? Alejandra?
So based on my experience on council and the development agreement that I supported, that we hadn't had a development agreement in the last 20 years, that developer for those units, he went above the 10%. He did 24%, and the La Cumbre project is a lot bigger than that. I would say anything between 20 and 30.
All right, Wendy?
For that question, it's important that we also look at our housing element and our regional housing needs, because we need to make sure how many of each type of unit are we looking for? Do we really need more market rate units? Do we need more affordable units? Do we need more workforce units? And I think that's what we need to abide by. So whatever the need of the community is, that's what it should be majority. So, I mean, if you're looking for a number, I guess I would say majority of the units, and ideally if I can push for it to be more than half of the units to be truly affordable workforce housing, the more the better. It's what we need.
All right, Jerry, you took a couple of my questions, so I'm gonna go back to the one that we didn't ask. So I apologize. We're gonna go back to rent control for 1 second. Assuming that Prop 33 passes, if it does, and all restrictions are lifted on what local governments can do, what would a rent cap ordinance look like? Is it 2%? Is that the number? How would you craft it? And we'll start with you, Wendy. If you're elected, what is the number? What would it look like?
So a rent stabilization ordinance, after my years of experience working with city staff, current city council members, working families and policy experts on this, it would be a 2% cap. And here's why. My day job is I'm a labor organizer, so I work directly with working families. And the other side of the housing crisis people sometimes don't talk about is the fact that wages are not keeping up with rent increases. And that's where that number came from. The average wage increase, if you're able to even get one, 2% is, if you get 2%, at least that's something. A lot of jobs don't even get rent increases. Not rent increases, wage increases. So a rent stabilization ordinance, in my view, would be, yes, a 2% cap. We would also establish a rental registry to be able to keep track of rents not going past that limit, and to make sure that we keep track of the habitability of units. That would be funded by the rental registry per unit per fee that we would implement, and it's been very successful in other cities. The other thing that we would implement is a rent board, which would be the governing body to be able to enforce rent stabilization, but would also be the body that condo owners, small mom and pops could go to and say, hey, I have a legitimate reason for raising the rent past the legal limit, and we can work that out. So I want to make sure that we include the newly built units.
Okay, all right. And then Councilmember Gutierrez, you've said you don't support a rent control ordinance, rent stabilization. Is there a number you could support? Obviously, when you're in office, if this comes up again, you may have to reach some sort of compromise. If it's not 2%, is there a number you could support, or is it just a no?
Josh, we have rent control already in the state of California. What we need to create is a balanced housing solution. So what happens is rent control is just a Band-Aid. It's only going to help the people that are housed right now, but that's not a solution for the generations to come. There's more students, there's people that are getting hired that need housing. We also have a high demand for houses, and we haven't really built anything either. So you put a rent cap, and then now property owners are suffering with cancellations of home insurance. Then you have inflation. You also have property taxes that go up. So the mom and pops that my opponent talks about to protect, they're the first ones to sell when there's a rent control. And there hasn't been a city in the state of California that we can say that it has helped the housing crisis. It actually creates the opposite. The working class ends up leaving those cities. You have very clear division of just market rate and very, very low. You have gentrification that happens. And so we need to create a balance. And in order for landlords to maintain their properties and be able to be good landlords to tenants, we have to create a balance. We can't put a cap.
So no number, the 10%, whatever, you're fine with that, but no number.
No, we need to figure out to build more homes in Santa Barbara.
Okay. All right.
All right, I'm going to steal 13 or 14 more of Josh's questions. Couple of District 1 specific issues real quick. As you know, there's a huge amount of debate and discussion, endless, about State Street, but what about Milpa Street? What should be done to bring more economic vitality to the main business corridor of District 1? Alejandra, you want to?
Thank you, Jerry, for that question. I've said this, I've been very vocal about Milpas when we discuss about State Street and all the money that we have poured into State Street. And Milpas has shown that even in really hard times during COVID, Milpas has thrived. I strongly believe, and I'm hopeful that hopefully we can get an association going on Milpas. The problem with Milpas is that, again, it's the working class. So a lot of people that live there are working day to day to survive, to stay in Santa Barbara and to keep up with inflation. And so a lot of people don't get involved. And what I really would like to do is hopefully, when I continue to be in office, is to provide more research, more education, to bring business owners together, to provide better sidewalks on Milpas instead of pushing ideas into the district that are not meeting our needs. We have a bicycle lane that the city poured us so much money that is hardly ever used. We have a lot of children that walk to school, and so to be able to revitalize Milpas, it's very important to the community there.
All right, Wendy?
Thank you, Jerry. I agree with Ms. Gutierrez. The revitalization of Milpas needs to be focused on supporting our small businesses. And my conversations with small businesses, a lot of times what comes up is just the bureaucratic red tape that there is at City Hall. And a lot of business owners who sometimes, they speak both languages, but they feel more comfortable in Spanish. And they don't really feel like there are enough resources in their preferred language at City Hall. So one of the first things that I would want to do is make sure that we provide these resources with an angle of language justice, and that we ensure that people, no matter what language they're choosing to use, have access to those resources. It's also about meeting people where they're at, because I've been speaking to a lot of business owners on Milpas and State Street, and they have reached out to the city for resources, but they didn't really hear back. And so it keeps coming up that, city's not very responsive and they need more resources. And I think expecting people, like Ms. Gutierrez said, they're living, they're working every day trying to survive. So expecting folks to just take time out of their day to come to City Hall is not realistic. We need to be out there. And unfortunately, in the last 4 years, business owners have not seen Ms. Gutierrez be out there. So that would be the key difference between her and I, is that I'm already out there and I would continue to be out there as a city council member.
Alejandra, if you want 30 seconds to respond.
Please. I do want to educate the public of what happened on Milpas. My district is known to be taken advantage of. And there was a couple years back where Milpas wanted to create an association, and it became super political. So you had outside voices coming in because they wanted a political position, and what they created was division within my own Latino community and folks in the business community. And we are still living the aftermath of that situation. And then on top of that, the city already has a lot of red tape just to get the resource into the community.
All right, thank you. And finally, do you support the proposal to spend $32 million of public funds to build a pedestrian bridge over the 101 to provide better access to the waterfront? Wendy?
You know, I have been speaking to city staff about this, and it's a bit of a complicated issue because it would be nice to have that, but we are also in a budget shortage. And I want us to be smart about how we use our funds. I would love to revisit that project and assess whether it's truly a necessity for the east side, because there are a lot of pressing needs on the east side, and we need to make sure, I mean, $32 million is a lot of money. We want to make sure that it's invested in what people truly need.
Ollie?
That was an agenda item that came to council, and I was very vocal that I did not support it at the time because it was publicized to the public that the city was going after those funds to build this bridge, when in reality the city just wanted to put an application to the state to see what grade they would get. And for me, that was a waste of time of city staff because we have a lot of pressing issues. Another thing that having experience working with city staff, and what a lot of people don't know, is that there are 2 projects in that area. And the state of California told the city, the sustainability department, they had a proposal to be able to expand where the Sycamore Creek ends, and it's right by the zoo. It's right by where the bridge is going to end. And so the city said, either you work on getting funding and applying for the bridge, or to make where the creek ends, the outage of the creek, be able to expand it. And for me, it's more critical to support the expansion of where the creek ends to avoid flooding in my district.
Great, thank you. Let's move to State Street. We're going to start with Councilmember Gutierrez on this question. What is your assessment of the work of the State Street Advisory Committee to date? Has the committee moved with enough urgency to match the urgency of the needs of the downtown?
Thank you for that question. Having experience working in government, and especially living and working in Santa Barbara, I understand that it's always really difficult in the city because there's so much red tape to move a project forward. I wish that we can, as a community, come together, but we've been really divided about State Street, and I think that's why there's been a holdup. There's also been changes of leadership. But no, we haven't really addressed the needs. And I think because there's a lot of special interests as well. I wish that we can start moving forward. It hasn't worked that that State Street has been closed. I have vocalized my support for a pilot program to partially close State Street, to provide a shuttle that will provide access to everyone in the city, and just to create more mobilization downtown to get more business going. And I'm really appreciative of the work that my colleagues and the community is doing in the State Street Master Plan, but it has been very divided with special interest, and it's been political, but I think it's time that we start moving forward.
Okay, thank you. Wendy Santamaria?
Yes, so State Street, there's been, the huge debate of cars or no cars, but in my opinion, we're wasting a lot of our energy on trying to debate about cars when we should be focusing our limited time, energy, and resources into supporting local businesses to really make it into State Street and to be able to establish themselves as a permanent staple in our community. At the end of the day, State Street, whether it's opened or closed, what we need is to drive more business to it. We need to have lucrative businesses that will actually be able to stay on State Street. And look at State Street. There's not very much parking you can do there. If you open it up to cars, cars don't shop. It's people that shop. And at the end of the day, if you drive down State Street, you're still gonna have to park off of State Street and walk to it anyway. So I've spoken to a lot of business owners on Lower State Street, which is in my district, and a lot of them have told me, you know what, keeping it open to people and closed off to cars driving by has actually helped my business. And so I don't wanna come in with an idea or agenda of my own. I really wanna listen to what's going to help these businesses thrive, because at the end of the day, that's what it's for.
Okay, let me kind of stick on State Street here. So much has been discussed about building housing downtown. And one of the barriers that property owners say to building housing downtown is that they don't have enough density in order for them to make it profitable and viable. So they often say, oh, it's easier to build a hotel. We do have the big project on Gutierrez Street in Anacapa, but we're talking about the State Street corridor. What should the city do to allow people to own those who own those properties, incentivize them to build housing? Because right now they say city won't allow us enough density to build housing in a way that makes sense for us. Would you support higher density? Would you support going, 60 feet? How high can you support? How do we bring more housing downtown? Let's start with you, Wendy, please.
Thank you, Josh. I do support the construction of affordable workforce housing, and I really want to make sure we make that distinction, because if we're just creating market housing on State Street, it's not going to do anything for our housing crisis. And it bears repeating that only building housing is not the way to solve the housing crisis, because you need to account for the tenants that are already living in their units. So we need to make sure that the housing solution, yes, includes the building component, but it has to include all the other components of a real housing reform package. So as far as density and heights, I want to make sure that the density conversation takes into consideration impacts to water supply, impacts to waste management, impacts to traffic. It needs to take those into account, because we can't create an unsustainable project. So density can be considered so long as it's not putting a strain on our current resources, and in my opinion, as long as it's majority affordable. It needs to be, because we need to be, as city leaders, more firm about this is what our community needs. This is a beautiful city. People will always want to build here, and it will always be lucrative to build here. Property prices have been going up an insane amount over the last few years. So it is a lucrative idea to build here, but we need to be firm about what we allow developers to do. So yeah, commercial, mixed use commercial and housing would be wonderful. It would bring it would allow workforce to be able to live there. It would also bring clientele directly to the State Street businesses. So I think it's one key component that we can use to truly revitalize State Street. 4 stories, 5, 6 stories, how tall could you go? My question? Okay. Yeah. I don't want to go anything beyond what we have. So, I mean, this is not LA, it's not Manhattan. We can't be building skyscrapers like the 8-story building that was proposed near the Mission. I mean, that's, in my opinion, a huge no. That's too tall. Okay. And we need to make sure that we abide by, our architectural and cultural background. Okay, thank you. Councilmember Gutierrez, multiple questions.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I'm actually really proud to announce this will be the first time that I actually mention this. I have been working with a local developer in town, housing provider, that had 3 hotel projects on the pipeline to be built, and because of the relationship building that I've had in this community, he is now going to convert one of his hotels into housing, and he's now working with the housing authority to bring workforce housing into the downtown. I think many cities have shown examples of the importance of having housing in the downtown area. And I, as a local, and I treasure our downtown, and I would really support not to build any type of, buildings higher than the height limits that we have right now.
All right, thank you. We're getting a little tight on time. I want to ask you 2 yes or no questions, and if you would just you can elaborate maybe 30 seconds, but don't take the full time on these 2. First, do you think all 8 blocks of the current promenade should remain closed to cars? And second, do you support or oppose a moratorium on construction of new hotels? Allie, I think you're first this time.
The first question about opening to cars downtown. No, like I said, I think we need to start trying something differently and opening a part of State Street to cars and monitor that and see how that is working, because what we have now is not working. And the second question,
The hotel
the
moratorium.
yeah, I think we do have to put some sort of control now with hotels and really focus on the housing crisis that we have. But again, we have to do it mindfully, and we have to create community. We cannot vilify developers because they want to build hotels. I think we really need to start coming together as a community to create a balance.
All right, Wendy, keep all 8 blocks closed to cars or open some or all, and the moratorium on hotels.
Thank you, Jerry. We do need to come together as a community and make sure that we have input from our existing businesses on State Street on if we were to open any, which ones would make more sense. The majority of the folks that I've talked to, both community members, local families that run the businesses here, they like it closed. So at the end of the day, I want to abide by what our community is asking for. As far as the hotel moratorium, yeah, we need that. Housing over hotels always, that will always be my stance. Not because hotels are bad, but because we have a lot already. I mean, you walk downtown, there are so many of the big names, but also small boutique hotels that are owned by local families, and even they aren't at full capacity. I would rather drive the business to the existing locally owned hotels and like bed and breakfast that we have here and allow them to thrive rather than introduce more competition into the market.
All right, one more quick one. Are you for or against the proposed 1/2 cent sales tax increase on the November ballot? In 30 seconds, why? Allie?
I have been very vocal about I don't support the tax. It's a regressive tax. I believe it's going to affect those, especially in my district. I understand that we have to balance our budget, but I don't think we have to create another tax to be able to balance the budget. I know I clarified this in Josh's podcast. He had some misunderstanding. I voted no on the tax, but I did vote with my colleagues to put a priority list if that tax would go through.
All right, Wendy, for or against?
After speaking to city staff who have been working on this sales tax measure, I would support it because our city staff said that this would be the way to preserve jobs at the city level and to make sure that community resources like our libraries and parks can stay open. And I mean, I'm not happy about the position we've been put in. Just a few years ago, we had a budget surplus, and I remember being there advocating for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund to have some of that money, and that's why we have it today. But a regressive tax is going to impact, our lower income community more. And at the same time, it's a balance between they'll be impacted more, but they'll also be able to retain access to the services like the library and all of that. And we won't lose city staff that can staff those positions, right? So it's not ideal. And I want to make sure that if that sales tax goes through, we are careful with how we use that money for the true priorities of the district. But we need to find more avenues. We can't just be taxing ourselves to death to make up for a potential mismanagement of the budget. We need to be fiscally responsible.
Thank you. And just to clarify, I didn't have a misunderstanding on that. At Finance Committee, you voted one way, and then Council, you voted a different way and didn't offer an explanation. So I just want to make it clear. It wasn't that I misunderstood, it was that you didn't explain why you changed your vote, just to be clear. Okay, we're going to ask a couple specific questions. So I have a question for Councilmember Gutierrez and then a question for Wendy Santamaria. Okay, Councilmember Gutierrez, you were elected the first time by 8 votes with support from the Santa Barbara County Democratic Party. You did not seek an endorsement from them this time. Just this week, Christian Alonso, the Santa Barbara Young Democrats, put out a press release saying you missed 60 meetings, council and other committee meetings. Can you talk about that and address that? Because there is a feeling that you courted the Democrats and now you don't want them and they feel let down. So can you address this issue, why did you not seek the Democratic Party's endorsement this time? And what do you say to people who are putting out press releases to the media that you missed 60 meetings?
Thank you for the question, and thank you for that information. I didn't know that this individual had put the press release out there, and I do want to clarify something. I didn't seek the Democratic Party. They actually came to me. I never had plans to become a politician. I've always said I'm a public servant. And I didn't seek their endorsement because they made it very clear that the minute that I didn't push their political agenda, I wasn't part of the party. And I won 8 votes because of the people that I have served for many, many years and that believed in me. People will always have their opinions. And the reason that I have so many people watching this race, one, because I'm a local. I wasn't groomed to become a politician, and my vote is not to be bought. I stick to my values. And when you do the right thing for the greater good and not a specific political party, those are the consequences, and I'm okay. I'm okay. This is why I'm running again. And I will put people's needs before any political party or political agendas.
And you addressed it on my podcast, but can you just quickly explain why you missed some meetings?
Yes, I addressed it in your podcast, and I was ill, but I also want to remind people that we were in COVID, and I find it so ironic that those people that say that I have missed so many meetings, and I just heard my opponent that I missed when we hired the city administrator. I was actually one of the very few that advocated to hire this specific city attorney. During COVID, I was actually present in my community, in the district, providing Wi-Fi for the students that couldn't afford. I opened the first educational pods in the entire city to provide children that live renting one rooms or didn't have space to actually go to school or didn't have access to a computer. I provided food once a week. So I was actually in my community. I might not have been part of these social groups with political agendas, and maybe that's why they were upset.
Okay, thank you. Jerry's going to have the question for Wendy.
Wendy, Councilmember Gutierrez several times has referred to being born and raised here, having deep roots in the community. You've lived in Santa Barbara a relatively short time, and in your campaign have really focused on tenants and their needs and the problems of renters. What assurance can you give voters and residents outside of District 1 that you understand and will consider the needs of the whole city before those of your district?
Thank you, Jerry. That's a great question. So a lot of the solutions that I'm advocating for are for the entire city and not just limited to District 1. I have spent nearly a decade organizing and working in this community, advocating for working families. It goes anywhere from, yes, advocating for tenants to not be displaced and not end up like our in-house community, and it ranges all the way to fighting for strong contracts and making sure that our essential workers have good wages and benefits. So I want to make sure that, yes, we focus on housing, and I know folks often mention, like, that's all you care about. I mean, honestly, housing is at the crux of so many other issues, and it's why I advocate for it so much. But let's not forget the rest of the pressing issues. Balancing our budget, addressing that budget shortfall, really making sure that Milpas and State Street have the support to thrive, that we address the issue of crazy power outages. And I've actually been discussing with CEC staff. I don't think I've said this in public before, but I've been working with CEC staff because they are working on creating these microgrids for neighborhoods. And these microgrids would be a really good resource to create resiliency against the frequent power outages that happen in the east side and in other parts of the city. So we need to make sure that that our next city council member is focused on the needs of everybody, not just a wealthy few. It needs to be about our climate resiliency. We need to do something about floods, update storm drainage infrastructure. There is a long list of community needs, and I'm ready to address them.
Just one follow-up to like zero in on Jerry's question.
Yeah.
There are property owners in this room.
Mm-hmm.
We know they're watching. Mm-hmm. They know they see you as, if you get on council, you're going to pass rent control, you're going to be the fourth vote. What can you say to them so that they can, I mean, do you have anything to say to them that you're not an enemy of them? Like, how will you work with them? How can they see you on the council as not just somebody who's going to be pro-renter, pro-tenant, pro-things that they have opposing views on?
Right. I'm glad you asked that, Josh. So I've been working over the years with a lot of the good small mom and pop landlords, and a lot of the policies or the suggestions that I'm putting forward is making sure that we don't hurt our local mom and pops. We need to make sure that there are exemptions for them. We need to remember this is generational wealth for them, and they're really just trying to support their families. So I've been very clear about or I hope I haven't. In case I haven't, I'll do it now. But really the issue in the city has been the out-of-town landlords who are often absent. Any tenant that or honestly any tenant, any person that you talk to walking down the street, if you ask them, where do you rent from, and it's a big property management company, chances are they've had a very bad experience, either not having their needs addressed, mold, health issues. There's so many things that happen. So we need to make sure that we balance those things. I understand that developers want to create profit, and Santa Barbara is a great place for that, but we need to make sure that we balance the need to make profit and the need for people to have a home, which is a basic need. And I think there's a balance there. I've already been working with some mom and pops, and they are huge supporters of my campaign because they know that I will create a balance and not a divide between landlords and tenants.
Okay, thank you. We're going to wrap up, but we have time for just a couple more questions. But 1 minute answers before your closing statements. Do you support or oppose the proposed contract between the city and the Santa Barbara South Coast Chamber of Commerce for developing an economic development plan at a cost of up to $1 million over 3 years? This is a proposal, no bid. They just worked it out, came to the Finance Committee, going to go to the council. Do you support this? We'll start with Councilmember Gutierrez.
Yes, I do support it. I mentioned it in council. I think it's really important that we invested in a staff member to create business relationships within business to create that economic development sector that we were missing in our city. So being able to partner up with the chamber, who has already worked for many, many years with local businesses, has already created many relationships in the city, it's a no-brainer, and it's actually a great investment because they have already a plan, and most importantly, they have already relationships with small business owners and the larger corporations that are here.
Okay, thank you. Wendy?
Can you repeat the question, please? Or is it a different question?
No, same question. Okay. So do you support or oppose the City of Santa Barbara's plan to partner with the Santa Barbara South Coast Chamber of Commerce on a development plan? There was no bid, there was no request for qualification for proposals, and it's going to cost the city up to $1 million a year, and also they're counting on the sales tax passing to help pay for this. So essentially, do you support the city's partnership with the chamber to create an economic development plan?
Great, thank you for repeating the question, Josh. So I do support the partnering of with the Chamber of Commerce, because we need to make sure that we have a centralized location and a centralized voice of the needs of our local businesses. I do want to make sure that in this plan, we don't leave out our Latino business owners. We need to make sure that this is an inclusive plan, and it costing $1 million a year. I mean, I want us to be able to explore other avenues of revenue, because at the end of the day, we can't only be relying on taxing ourselves to get this kind of thing through.
Okay, we got time for one more question. If you hold your answer to 1 minute, it'd be swell. And then we'll go to closing statements. In the last 5 years, the state of California has spent $24 billion on homelessness programs, and the unhoused population in the state has increased by 50,000. In Santa Barbara County last year, total spending on homelessness was $112 million, and the unhoused population increased 12%. How long can we defy the laws of arithmetic, and what is wrong with our policies? Alejandra, you're first.
Thank you for that question. I think as leaders, as policymakers, we have to be very effective when it comes to putting money behind programming, and we have to hold programs accountable. I was in a Zoom call where the county was giving a report back to the unhoused issue, and they mentioned how 70% of the money that came from the state, they used it for administration fees. And so I think that a lot of the money that we pour into programming is going into actually hiring people to manage these programs. And I think we need to be we need to think outside the box and be able to centralize the programs that we have to be more effective. And I think the city has done a wonderful job in creating the Faro Center, where we brought in, instead of working in silos, where we have a lot of resources for the unhoused. And so now with the Faro Center, they're all in one central location. There's wraparound services, and that's more of a effective way to solve the unhoused problem that we have, but it's also looking long term, and that's actually more sustainable than working in silos and fighting for the same pot of money.
All right, Wendy?
Thank you, Jerry. I actually agree with Ms. Gutierrez. I do feel like we have been spending far too much time on the money on the administrative side of the unhoused population concerns and less time on actually housing people. The Faro Center is a great example of those wraparound services that we do have access to, but really the only antidote to homelessness is finding people a stable home. And in criminalizing our unhoused population, in just doing encampment sweeps, that's a Band-Aid solution. It's only moving the problem from one place to another. And yeah, there might be a street that is now clean, right? But just because you don't see the problem doesn't mean that it ceased to exist. So we need to make sure that we treat this problem with humanity, with fiscal responsibility, and that we make sure that the money is going truly to create a path for folks to have a stable home, not towards the administrative fees.
Okay, great, thank you. It's been a great hour of conversations, but let's wrap up. Closing statements, 2 minutes. Just give us your best pitch, summary for why voters should elect you. We'll start with Wendy Santamaria. Yeah.
There are too many issues facing our district and our city for us to remain complacent any longer. I've mentioned several today: housing, flooding, power outages, public safety. There are too many things at stake for us to miss meetings, for us to not show up, for us to not respond to constituents. We need a leader that is present, and the community in Santa Barbara and the East Side knows that I've been that person showing up for them. I have spent years organizing in this community, pushing our city staff and our city council to really move forward on addressing the community's needs. And throughout the years, I've built great partnerships. If elected, I know that I already have the infrastructure and the support within City Hall to move these things forward. And frankly, I mean, if you asked me a few years ago, was I gonna be doing this? No, not at all. My roots are in being a working class tenant who's just trying to fight to survive here and trying to help my neighbors do the same. But unfortunately, we have seen a lack of representation from our current council member, and I had no choice but to run and answer the call from the community. I wanna make sure that we address the needs of everybody, right? Not just corporate landlords, not just one group or the other. This city is run by the working class. The city is run by the folks that keep the city, running, and these are the people that I would be supporting.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Gutierrez, we'll give you the last word. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been an honor to serve for my city. I've been sitting in the council seat for almost 5 years, so I definitely come with experience. I'm doing the job, and I think my voting record has proven that I am a leader that isn't afraid to take very important, stands when they're not popular. And especially for a district like myself that doesn't always have representation in our city council meetings, I have really valued to put our community members' needs first than political agendas. And I think especially for locals that have been born and raised here, I've said it over and over, sometimes, most of the time, locals will feel part of our neighborhoods, but not part of the larger community. And when you have a party that one time supported a Democrat, a young Latina Democrat from the district that wasn't polished to be a politician, and now they're against her, no, we need to vote for leaders that are gonna vote for the needs of the people and not political agendas, especially in this city. This city has always been a city that we always knew it was only gonna get more expensive. It's such a popular place all over the world, so we have to be mindful leaders, but leaders that are also going to take a stand, even though it's not popular. Just like when the city was thinking about defunding the police. I took the stand to not defund this department based on what a department did in another state. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Well, Councilmember Alejandra Gutierrez, Wendy Santamaria, thank you so much. What a great conversation that was, and very, very substantive, and I really appreciate your focusing on actually answering the questions that were asked, which very often doesn't happen. Okay, that concludes our first district presentation. We're going to take a short break, and we'll come back with the candidates in the third district. Thanks you all. Thank you all.
All right, testing, testing. If everybody can begin to take their seats, we're going to get going with the District 3 City Council forums. A couple minutes, but if you could take your seats, that'd be appreciated. We'll be right back. Things went great, Jerry. Thank you so much. Welcome everybody again to our second candidate forum of the night. We heard there's watch parties going on at home and all throughout town, so this is a really exciting night. And just a quick shout out to acknowledge that TV Santa Barbara is going to be celebrating our 50th year here in 2025. We have some incredible activities and events to commemorate 50 years of community media in Santa Barbara. A couple shout outs to the TV Santa Barbara team who is bringing this live broadcast, to Jerry, Josh, and Hap. I know how much you put into this, and it's such an important event to bring this conversation to our community. Sylvia Uribe, thank you. She's providing a Spanish language translation over to those of you in the audience tonight. And the rebroadcast that we'll polish up and air on community television will include Spanish language in addition to the multilingual closed captioning that we already have on TV Santa Barbara. Quick shout out to tell you a little bit about why TV Santa Barbara is important. It's a platform for local voices where different perspectives can be heard, and tonight is a perfect example of that, a candidate forum brought to you by your local community access station. So thank you for joining us. These candidate forums are really important. It provides the voters a chance to hear directly from the candidates. So thank you so much for being here. A big thank you to those in the audience. We have KUIT, the Santa Barbara Independent, and a few others that I see. So thank you for being here. The city of Santa Barbara has been a partner with community television since its very inception, nearly 50 years ago, and we thank you for your continued support of this community treasure. And then I would also like to say thank you for your commitment and for your dedication to serving our beautiful city that we all love. Your willingness to step up and run for city council demonstrates your passion for making a positive impact on Santa Barbara. Your leadership and vision are essential for the future of our community, and we are grateful for your willingness to be here tonight and to serve. So on behalf of us all, thank you. Best of luck in this upcoming election, and thank you for your support of community television. Jerry and Josh, take it away.
Thanks, Eric. Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to the first Santa Barbara City Council election forums of the 2024 campaign season. I'm Jerry Roberts. This is my colleague, Josh Molina, sitting next to me. We'll co-moderate tonight's discussions. We also want to second the motion in thanking Sylvia Uribe, who's providing our Spanish language translation. We heard from the District 1 candidates a little earlier. In just a moment, we'll hear from those in District 3. Just a reminder that tonight's forum is co-sponsored by Newsmakers, the Santa Barbara Talks podcast, and by our host, TV Santa Barbara, which obviously is live streaming the event. Josh?
All right, thank you, Jerry. Before we introduce the candidates, just a little explanation of how we're going to proceed. Our purpose is to give each of the candidates the chance to state their views on major issues facing the city and in their districts. We also hope to draw out some key differences between the candidates to help voters make their decisions. We're going to keep the discussion a little loose in order to take time for follow-up questions as well as responses from the other candidates. This debate's going to last about an hour. We're asking all the candidates to limit their responses to 2 minutes, and at the end you'll have 2 minutes to offer closing statements. Jerry?
And so let me introduce our candidates. On my right, first incumbent council member Oscar Gutierrez, and the challenger Tony Becerra. Thank you both for coming. Thank you both for running, putting yourselves out there, which is you got to be crazy to do anyway, but thank you for that. Oscar, let me start with you by asking, why should voters support you for another term? Why do you deserve re-election?
Thank you, Jerry and Josh. I appreciate you. Thank you, Sensei Becerra, for participating in this. I believe I deserve to be re-elected because my passion for the city has inspired me to not just do the position that the people have elected me to, but to surpass it. So I say that because, and I actually encourage you to fact check me, that I have become the most responsive and accessible city council member in our city's history. And I say that because if you look at how many emails I've responded, how many meetings I've attended, how many phone calls I've had, how many events I've gone to, how many social media posts I've responded to, I tallied them up to over 27,000. And it's been noted in the media and among the public that I'm quote unquote ubiquitous. Yeah, thank you. English is a second language for me, so forgive me. And I want to further continue making history for my community, for my district, and for the city. And I feel like, especially now more than ever, it's extremely important that the people feel like there's somebody that they chose to represent them is doing the work and showing up and being the voice that they trust. And I want to continue the hard work that I've already accomplished, like providing resources and services for our community that hasn't had it before. And I want to make sure that I can continue that in the next 4 years.
All right, thank you. Tony, please spell ubiquitous. No, just kidding. Tony, what would you do differently that would make you a more effective representative? Why should voters vote for a change?
Well, I think the biggest part of that, or the biggest focus for me would be is leadership, taking people with me along the path. I've been a mentor, a trainer for years. I've helped people have a lot of success in different endeavors, whether it's through school, through business, through raising families. I take my life experiences and put it to work. So I think when I look at what's going on and where we need to go, we can't just do it by just going to events. We need to create events. We need to create a new buzz, allow people to see a vision and then follow that. Being an entrepreneur, that's what I do. I try to create new programs and try to get kids involved with things that they wouldn't normally think about doing. Even at the nonprofit that I'm the president of in Goleta is we're constantly looking for we have kids in the gym, but we want to get more kids. We want to get more girls involved. We want to get kids from less fortunate families to be in our gym, So we're always looking for new ways to do it. And I think the leadership ability that I have, the experiences I have running a business, the big experience I have as being a father, and really use that to my advantage to help our community grow.
Okay, thank you. Let's talk about housing. That's going to be a few of our questions today. Help us understand your personal perspective when it comes to your housing situation. So much of the decisions made at City Hall have to do with housing, with tenants, with renter protections. What is your personal housing situation, and how does that inform how you will serve either another term or on the council? Let's start with you, Councilmember Gutierrez.
Thank you, Josh. So I'm privileged enough to say that I am able to live in a house owned by my parents who sacrificed so much to be able to live the American dream here. So I live with my mom, who is elderly and disabled, and as much as she tries to argue that I'm not taking care of her, I am taking care of her, and likewise. So I'm privileged in that sense, but I don't take it lightly, because as I ran the first time and I met with the people of the 3rd District, they consistently told me that housing was a major conflict in their life that made it hard for them to live here. So I promised them, I gave them my promise that I would serve as a council member to uphold their request to make it easier to live here, especially when it came to housing. And since then, I've supported tenant right issues like just cause eviction, the restriction to the rent evictions, also right to counsel, also tried to pass a rent cap. I'm supportive of my colleagues having a 25% affordable housing stipulation in the La Cumbre Plaza shopping center or apartment complex. So that's my stance on housing as of now.
Okay, great, thank you. Tony, same question.
So housing is, so personally, I rent. I've rented since I moved out of my mom's house when I was 20 years old. So I've raised, family in Santa Barbara. We lived on, Figueroa Street. We moved to Islay. We've been in Goleta. We bounced around, trying to, improve ourselves along the way. I'm the youngest of 12, so I see the balance. I see some of my family members had some success. Some of us are in the middle, and some of us on their lower end. And so I realized, where people are hurting, and most families are struggling, where we're trying to, both parents are working, who's watching the kids, how do we pay for daycare? All these issues are a daily thing for us, going paycheck to paycheck. I'm a business owner. When you're a business owner, especially small business, a third of the population of small business owners make money. A third break even, and a third lose money. But I've been in all three actually. So the process is really about trying to find the best solution for our families in Santa Barbara. I deal with a lot of parents that come and see me and tell me their woes. And so I'm where my business is based, I'm right downtown, what I call downtown State Street at the west side. I'm on San Andres and Mitchell Terreno. People come and say hi to me all the time. I've been there for 28 years, and so my ear has been generational, listening to their complaints, listening to their struggles, and I think that with the experience that I have, I can help find solutions in our neighborhood to make it affordable for everybody.
Okay, thank you for that. Let's talk a little bit about rent control. As you know, Proposition 33 on the November ballot could have a big effect on rent control by taking off the Costa-Hawkins law, which has restricted local government for some years. Let me ask both of you, what is your position on Proposition 33? And if your position prevails in November, what impact do you see it having on Santa Barbara? Tony, why don't you?
Well, so I never thought I'd be in this position, first of all. I'm a business owner, family guy, a coach. I was a coach for 21 years in our high school. So I don't know all the ins and outs of what politics are going on right now, but I'm willing to find the answers. As a mentor, I have kids come up to me that have a lot of issues going on. I don't always have the answer, but I reach out to people that do have the answers, and I find solutions for them. So that's what I'm going to do with this. I do understand, though, taking away some of taking away some of the articles in Prop 33 would make it difficult or make it less attractive for new builders to come in, because they're exempt now for 15 years with not having to worry about rent control, but this would get rid of that. So what would be the incentive to come in and build, especially when most of their housing, from what I understand the city's doing, is looking more towards lower income, which I'm completely for, but if you take away the incentive for the builder, then nothing's going to happen. So I don't want to be in a situation where nobody's coming and building new housing. Now we're stuck in trying to create something different. So I'm up for the challenge, but we just got to figure out something that's going to make sense. And I think taking away some of the exemptions from new builders I don't think is the answer.
All right, we'll put you down as leaning no. Oscar, where are you on Prop 33, and what impact would it have?
Well, as I said, I'm supportive of making sure that the community can affordably live here, and Prop 33, sorry, dyslexia kicking in. That's intended to help the people be able to live more affordably, and I know that it could run the risk of it deterring some developers to want to build, but if you look at the history of the cost of living and the value of property in California, and specifically in Santa Barbara, it's only gone up regardless of what housing ordinance or law has been implemented. It's only gone up. It's only skyrocketed, to be honest. So when I hear things like that, it's hard for me to believe it, just look at the numbers and look at the history of the cost of living and housing. It's only gone up no matter what law is implemented. So if this one's meant to help, then let's do it. And yeah, hopefully it doesn't deter developers to want to build, because it keeps saying they won't pencil out. But as much as I want to see 8-story apartment buildings in Santa Barbara, I think that needs to pass.
Okay, thank you. Staying on the issue of rent control, let's say Prop 33 passes and new buildings, new construction would also have to comply with local rent control restrictions. What would a rent control ordinance look like for you if you were on the council? Would you support a 2% rent stabilization cap? Would you support 3%, 4%, nothing? What would a local rent stabilization ordinance look like? We'll start with you, Councilmember Gutierrez.
Thank you, Josh. So I believe that, you know, the phrase rent control is radioactive. I'm pushing for a rent cap, which isn't necessarily rent control, and I hate to split hairs, but it's not. So a rent cap would just limit how much a property owner can raise the rent per year. So I've tried to pass a 2% rent cap in the past. I didn't have enough support for it then. I'm hoping now that some years have passed that my colleagues will see that it's needed. And if 2% is too low, then let's negotiate. I've met with the Board of Realtors. I helped form the housing crisis ad hoc with my other council members, and we've met with over 20 housing stakeholders in our community, and we've gathered their input, their ideas, their concerns about housing, and how we as city council members can address that. And we're consistently just trying to, in a way, just be receptive to what they're saying, but also negotiate something. And as I said, I'm for the rent cap, and if that means it's somewhere between 2 and 10, then let's talk about it. Let's come to an understanding.
Okay, thank you. Tony, same question?
Well, like you said, between 2 and 10, right now the state is at 10 roughly, you know. So I think my biggest concern with the cap is that I think it discourages people from coming in and building in our area. I have a personal friend that I met with who said, you know, he had owned an apartment building for quite a few years, and as soon as he and his friends heard about rent control, the prices immediately started going up. Since they mentioned rent control, prices have been going up. So, and I personally rented from a property owner who raised the rent $100 in 12 years. And the last landlord that I had raised it $185 in 14 years, you know? So it's like, not everybody's gouging everybody, you know, but the people that get hurt the most are gonna be those mom and pops that try to give the good deals to families, and then they can no longer do that because unfortunately their property value is based off how much money is coming in. And if they're now have to get up to market, then guess what's gonna happen? All those people who are getting the deals and no rent raises, their price is gonna go up. It's not gonna make it cheaper, it's gonna make it more expensive. So that's a personal experience for me. I've talked to other people that experience the same thing. And yeah, we do, you know, you can't, you know, move out of a place at $2,500 and go to $6,000, you know, which I've seen that on the west side. But, you know, there should be something in there to protect tenants, but not something where, you know, getting more government control of something that's already been established by the state.
So you're somewhere between 2 and 10%?
Well, I think what we have in order right now is great. I'm hopefully inflation drops a little bit more, and we'll see, you know, some lesser raises.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Oh, sorry, yeah, I'm looking at you.
Okay, next question. We obviously have been dealing with a term called rent evictions, where property owners will, you know, buy a building, tenants will get evicted because a lot of the Santa Barbara housing stock is really old, and there's been a lot of deferred maintenance, and so property owners will evict tenants and remodel, rebuild, renovate, and after they do that, the rents go up, and they go up in a way that a lot of those people can't afford to move back in. Would you support a right to return to that unit at the same rent as when their lease was terminated because of the renovations? City Council dealt with this. It's going to come up again. Would you support a right to return at the same rent after a rent eviction? Tony, we'll start with you.
Well, I don't know enough about it to really give you the best answer, but all I know is that, you know, when I had to remodel my business and I had to put, you know, new floors in and I had to comply with the restrictions that the city puts on me, it wasn't just a quick fix around. It was a guys meeting and doing it, but it was a huge expense for me. And so as a result, I had to raise prices because I put myself in more debt, you know. So I could see I mean, I understand that we want to have it the same, but if you want, you know, a better place, if you want to have improvements, if you want to have, a safe place to live, sometimes you have to pay a little bit more. I'm not saying they could gouge them. I mean, like I said it before, if I'm renting for $2,500, the next person's renting for $6,500. Heck no, I'm not in favor of that. But I think as long as, you know, it's reasonable, but the property owner has an obligation to do this stuff. But maybe there's a fix. Maybe there's a medium where we can get the city to give them some credits for doing it, and then they're not gouging the new tenants that are coming in or the old tenants that are coming back. So if they can come up with some type of system where they get a credit for doing that, so you reward the landlord for not raising the rent so much, for keeping it good, and then it solves a problem instead of constantly making them the bad guy.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Gutierrez.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Yeah, essentially, would you support a tenant being able to return to their unit after a property owner evicts tenants to renovate the building? It is a thing that is pejoratively referred to as a renoviction, and the property owners say, hey, we're investing a lot into this, of course we're gonna have to raise the rent. But what happens is people can't afford those new rents, and then they leave Santa Barbara. Would you support a guaranteed right to return at the same rent as when their original lease terminated?
Yes, when that issue came to us previously, I was for it. We didn't have enough support by my colleagues on the council at the time, and I'm willing to pursue it again because I believe that uprooting families, again, I have the privilege of not knowing or not living under the fear of eviction because by the time I was born, my parents owned the house that I live in. But my siblings and my parents, they had been evicted, and they do know what that fear is and what that rejection feels like, and it's traumatic. And I don't believe it's fair to just completely uproot a family or a person and essentially have them start over because at the very least, just allow them to come back if they choose to, because some of them, you know, they have their whole life revolving around that location where they live. So yeah, I'm completely for it.
Okay, one more question for me. And then,
can I be clear on that? I'm not in favor of kicking people out either, you know, and I have quite a few people that I know personally, including my sister, that they were kicked out. They did a renovation, they kicked them out. And some of them, I had one of my students' parents, they actually stayed during the entire renovation, and the landlord wanted to kick them out, even promised to give them a different place, but they stayed, and so they used their rights as tenants, which we need to support and enforce, and so they got to stay in it while they did it around them. They're still in the same location, so I'm definitely in favor of keeping families where they want to be, but I'm saying that, you know, it's real expenses. It's not like, you know, a couple $100. It's, you know, it's substantial to the bottom line. And, and if you expect, you know, landlords to keep the rents low, you need to support some of the stuff they're doing. And again, not gouging, but making it reasonable in increases.
Okay, thank you. One more question from me related to housing. La Cumbre Plaza, there is a big proposal, 642 units. A lot of the housing Santa Barbara has approved has been market rate. We have a 10% inclusionary housing ordinance. With a big development like this is a significant amount of housing. What percentage of below market rate housing, if you're elected to the council or if you get another term, would you say that development should have? Should it be 10%, 20, 30, 40, 50? I mean, what percentage of below market rate should that housing development have? And we will start with you, Councilmember Gutierrez.
Thank you. So when the 10% that we currently have now was first proposed to us on council, I proposed 25% because that's what other cities had passed. And I didn't get any support for it. People thought that was crazy. But when I heard my colleagues, Councilmember Friedman and Councilmember Jordan, propose that the La Cumbre shopping center housing development plan should have a 25% inclusionary housing stipulation, I was inspired by them. I was actually really, just impressed that they were willing to make that recommendation. And So even though at the time then we settled at 10, I initially proposed 25, and I'll continue to propose that and higher if possible. And again, I acknowledge the fact that it might scare some developers from building their multi-apartment complexes around our city, but it's got to be equitable.
25%. Tony, same question?
Well, just to start off with, I really don't like the idea. You know, I'm born and raised in Santa Barbara. You know, I like the hometown, you know, the small town feel. You know, I grew up on the Mesa, you know, and it was like, you know, it's like going visiting a neighbor when you went into a store shop, you know. So I like that. You know, I know that the Coomer Plaza area really has a dense, you know, car population going through there. You can never find a spot to park at 5 points. You know, it's ridiculous. And when you add 690 units, is that what it is?
50, yeah.
50, 70, it's all the same at that point. You know, how many more residents and how many more cars are in that area? So I'm not really in favor of that whole project, but if I had to say, you know, how many are going to be, you know, set aside for low income, you know, I don't know the actual numbers, but I would say somewhere probably between what he had recommended originally 10, 12% to 25%. I'm not sure, but I'm going to definitely get my team to do some research and see what that number is. But anyhow, I think
you're going to miss Macy's. That's
well,
what you're saying.
I'm going to miss, you know, the opportunity that Macy's gives. You know, again, being a business owner, you know, you drive down certain streets in certain cities, and it's small business, small business, small business. You know, when you take away business areas, then where are the small businesses going to go? Where are they going to have an opportunity? So, you know, I think, you know, we don't even talk about La Coomer Plaza and their design. I think it's horrible. You know, the businesses that are thriving are the ones that are facing the parking lot. Everything facing inward, and the Paseo part of it is struggling. So I think they need to reface that and make it more accessible. But that's a whole nother topic. I think, you know, thinking about the density up there. I mean, the 5 Point Center is the busiest intersection in Santa Barbara. And what are we going to do adding that many homes in that area and that many people? I mean, think about, you know, school time when you're trying to shuttle your kid to school. It's going to be crazy. So anyhow, that's just my 2 cents on that. Thank you.
Point of clarity. So just to be clear, that the developers are still going to have businesses on the ground floor. That's still going to be all business. It's just the floors above it that are going to be housing, just to be clear.
All right, let's, I want to ask about a couple of District 3 specific issues. As you know, there's always a huge amount of debate and discussion about State Street. But what about San Andres Street? What should be done to bring more economic vitality to the main business corridor of District 3? Tony?
Well, so that's the main reason why I'm here today. You know, I've been on San Andres for 28 years. When I got there, I think I punched myself because if you don't know, I teach karate. I'm a martial arts instructor, wrestling coach for many decades. But when I moved there, I thought I made the wrong decision because when I got there, within a week, there was a shooting at the corner. A lot of the businesses were boarded up. But since I've been there, you've seen a lot of change. About 20 years ago, they redid some of the sidewalks, which was great for a moment, for about a year. Then the city stopped coming in and cleaning. They removed some of the benches. They took away some of the garbage cans early on. And so it really made it more difficult for the businesses that are there, you know. In our area of San Andres, during the winter at 5:30, it's dangerous to be on the street. It's dark. You know, we have these beautiful magnolia trees, but the canopy is below the light, so the light doesn't hit the sidewalk. It's not a new problem. It's an ongoing problem. So, you know, having bad lighting. I have a lady came up to me the other day and said that she tripped on the sidewalk because she couldn't see and she smashed her face open, you know. So these are real issues. So improving the sidewalks. Across the street from my business, there was the nice red brick. They removed the brick because of the roots of the tree, and they put black asphalt in it and painted it red like no one's going to notice. But that's the type of attention we're getting on the west side. I think we need to do is we need to invest a little money. There's money going everywhere into Santa Barbara into infrastructure. Nothing's coming to the west side. And you know, my opponent here, Oscar, I love Oscar, by the way, I just love this guy. But, the thing is that we need to do things that are make a definite change on the west side. And I think lighting is going to be a big deal. People are racing down San Andres Street at 40 miles an hour. I have kids trying to cross the street, so we need something to slow them down. There should be a crosswalk on Sola. That when the trucks park on the street, they can't get past because people can't see. They're inching out, trying not to get hit. So I think having more accessibility for the pedestrians around there is a bigger deal than some of the bike lanes that block access to businesses. So I think there's a lot to work to be done. And my idea is that with my entrepreneurial spirit is to get people involved, not just the businesses in the area which they support me, but to also get the community behind us so that we can make changes that make a difference to them.
All right, thank you. Oscar?
Thank you. So I too love the businesses on the west side. I grew up going there and also grew up going to Sensei Becerra's dojo. And I can tell you that, I've consistently pushed our city staff to allocate more funding and resources and attention to San Andres, because I understand and respect that certain areas of town draw our biggest money generator, which is tourism, but areas like San Andres have consistently fared better than those other business areas like State Street and such. Like during the debris flow and the fires, State Street suffered a huge loss of revenue because the tourists stopped coming. But San Andres didn't drop much. Why? Because that's where the locals go. The locals didn't go anywhere. We were here. We were shopping there. So the businesses and the business owners on State Street are dedicated and loyal, and so are the customers. And they deserve more respect than what they're getting right now. And I can show you all the correspondence. I have all the emails that in the city council meetings where I've brought it up consistently. Even just this Tuesday, I brought it up again with the new Measure I. If it passes, I want to make sure there's a specific line item for money to go to all the business districts that are not State Street, that are not the waterfront, that are not Montecito. They need to go to these other areas because they deserve it. And during the pandemic, I helped the Greater Hispanic Chamber create the weekends on the west side where we had block parties every weekend during the summer. I also created TV commercials for every business on San Andres for free, didn't charge them at all. I promote events that they have. I've been making sure that I'm there for the west side businesses, and I'll continue to do so and do more if I'm reelected.
All right, thanks, Councilman.
Oh, also, can you let me know that resident that injured themselves? Because if they did injure themselves because of something the city should have taken care of, then she has the ability to get.
I think they're working on that.
Okay.
That was the first question I asked them.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I have great sympathy for people who trip and fall on the
Yeah.
sidewalk. But let me ask you, should the 400 block of State Street, which I believe is in the 3rd District, be closed to cars like the rest of the promenade, Tony?
Well, first of all, let me just start with that. So, being a local, and if you're really a local, one of the things we love to do is cruise State Street, which we can't do right now, but I still do it. I still cruise the boulevard, and I drive up State Street, and we go under the bridge that they spent millions of dollars widening the sidewalks, and then you come up onto the 400 block of State Street, and it's the ugliest block on State. And I didn't know until I started doing this process that that's in our district, and then it kind of made sense. If you neglect one area, you're going to neglect the other. So, look, when we come out from underneath that freeway, that should be the crown gem of the South Coast. There should be maybe an arch that says, welcome to historic Santa Barbara. All lit up, the sidewalks clean. Right now there's buildings that have plywood on the windows. They've been there for decades, literally, with the old Esau's. How is that part of the ordinance that you could put wood as your storefront? It doesn't make sense. So what we need to do is we need to be more proactive in that business area and pushing them to improve it, or having the city behind them, because that is really the welcome mat to our town. It's not the beachfront. It's that part. That's where it all starts. So I think, you know, the fact that it's been neglected, I would definitely make that a focal point as we go forward, you know, trying to improve that area, light it up at night. That thing should look like Christmas, you know, every single day of the week, you know. But that's where my stance on
And
that. It's definitely not closed.
Cars or no cars?
No, it's not closed now because that's the only way you can go right. You have to go up a block in order to go to the east side. So if you closed it right there, what would they do? They'd have to turn left and turn right. You know, it doesn't make sense to close more access right there, especially if you're trying to get to the east side of Santa Barbara.
Thanks. Oscar?
Yeah, I believe it should be closed. And the reason I say that is because I've actually gone to every business on the 400 block of State Street, and I've asked the business owners, how do you feel about it? And they all say, we need to be closed, just like the 500 block. It's not fair. They've said it themselves. These are the business owners. These are the employees of those businesses saying it's not equitable that they get the benefit of having State Street closed to cars and the extra attention they can give to their clients, and they can't. And if you've looked at the businesses on the 400 block, there's been more closures on the 400 block that's open to traffic now than the other blocks. Just specifically on the 400 block. So to me, that's proof positive that having it open to cars is actually bad for business as opposed to good for business. And I've looked into it. I looked at the demographics that those businesses are catering to are the demographics that are spending money. The demographics that are wanting cars back on State Street, they're not the demographics spending money. So even if we did open State Street back up to cars, the people that are wanting it open to cars again aren't going to be spending money at those stores because those stores aren't for them. They're not geared for them. They're not targeting them. So we need to be able to respect that and encourage it, not deter it.
One quick follow-up, Oscar. You are an incumbent. You are on the council. Why isn't the 400 block closed to cars? You've been in this position already.
Thank you. So city staff has been adamant that it is imperative for our first responders to have access to that block, but I've met with them several times and discussed whether making Gutierrez and Haley Street two-way streets again. Right now they're one-ways. If we make them two-way streets, it'll open up the flow and make it easier for our first responders to be able to get around State Street. And I mean, I think that'll be the compromise and the solution to that.
Okay, let's.
Well, can I say something on that? So, I mean, yeah, he's been in. So when he's talking about all the businesses, when he's talking about businesses, the people that I talk that own businesses on State Street, it's a battle between the bars and restaurants and the retail. I actually was in a car when I was talking to a friend, and they had a business for 27 years on State Street, and they're like, "Get me the heck out of here! I want this to go to my daughter, and I can't sustain it with the way it's working now, with it being closed." And they're willing to pay 3 times the rent in a different location of town than to stay on State Street. That tells you a lot about State Street. And another reason why a lot of people aren't going to State Street is because it looks so run down. Who wants to hang out in a hole?
Yeah.
You know?
My next question is going to be about broader State Street. Let's talk about State Street and the State Street Master Plan. It's taken 3 years. They're finally going to come forward with some sort of proposal. What do you think of the work of this committee, this very large committee that has been working on the future of State Street? How would you assess their efforts and their success levels so far? Why don't we start with you, Councilmember Gutierrez?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
How would you assess the effectiveness of the State Street Master Plan Committee? It's taken 3 years. We're in a similar situation. Are they doing a good job or not? What is your perspective?
Well, it's a volunteer position, so it's definitely doing what we were planning for it. I mean, this isn't something easy, right? This is theoretically a plan that we're going to implement that's going to last 100 years. So they want to make sure that they're making the right decision. And I'm supportive of each and every one of those members. I vetted each and every one of them, and I've been watching the meetings, and as of right now, it's obviously a pretty contentious issue. But again, if you spend the time and you talk to the majority of the businesses, they want it closed. They want it closed. The majority of them do. And I've met with the Chamber of Commerce, Hispanic Chamber, the Food and Beverage Committee, the Downtown Santa Barbara organization. all consistently said they want the street closed because it benefits their business. Now, let's take a moment and ask the business owners that are claiming that they're struggling, how much responsibility for the struggle that they're facing falls on them and the way they're running their business. Let's just take a moment to think about that and ask them, let's get real, you know? I have a business myself. I have my own small media business. I can easily blame whoever I want for not making enough money. Ultimately, it depends on how I'm running my business and whether or not the clients enjoy it.
Okay, thank you. Tony, how would you assess the work of the State Street Master Plan Committee, and have they been successful at solving the problems of what's happening on State Street?
Well, I don't think they've solved anything at this point, right? So I don't think they're doing a great job. I understand it's all volunteer, and that's tough. But I think, you know, one of the main things that, you know, we need to think about is compromise. How does this work for everybody? You know, I worked in the bars downtown Santa Barbara for 15 years. So, you know, I've seen the years, you know, I've seen an example, fiestas, you know, the parades going up and down. There's 200,000 people on State Street. You know, that's the best Black Friday any business can have. You know, that many people from, you know, 8 o'clock in the morning till 4, all day long, actually. And then what did they do during fiestas? They would, about 5 or 6 o'clock, they would close down Lower State Street and open it up as a promenade, allow people to do the crawl all over State Street. And if you're a local, you know what the crawl is, you know. But the idea is there was a compromise. And I think even now there's a possibility of doing that. If we can somehow let business do business, and then allow people to enjoy the promenade. They do it on farmers market night. They do it on special event nights. They could do it on weekends. The thing is that, you know, there has to be a compromise that works for everybody. You can't just pick one business, because all those businesses produce tax dollars that the city desperately needs, as we know now, because we're in such a bad state right now. So the idea is to generate more tax revenue, not adding a tax, but use what we can maximize what we have now. And I think that's going to be through compromise, not through, you know, choosing one side or the other.
Okay, thank you. Let's stick with State Street and the issue of housing. We know that developers say it's really tough to build housing downtown. The city does not allow enough density. We have a height limit, and we've seen developers choose to build hotels instead of housing. Oscar, you're an incumbent. You're familiar with this issue. What can the city do? What will you do if elected to another term to incentivize developers to build housing downtown? Because right now they say city doesn't allow enough density for it to be profitable, for it to pencil out for us. So what would you do to encourage housing downtown?
I'm for it. I think downtown is the exact location where the dense housing should go, because of access to retail stores and public transportation. I just believe that it needs to be affordable at a certain point, because if we want to encourage the workforce to live here, and if we want to have more people living here, you're going to have more people to work the businesses that they're going to be frequenting. And if they can't afford to work those businesses, to work those jobs, then they're not going to be able to live here. So we need to just make sure that it's affordable. And I mean, I'm willing to talk to these developers and hear them out and see what kind of compromise we can go to. But yeah, it needs to be affordable. And again, I'm all for building up around State Street. Yeah, it's just something that needs to happen.
Okay, Tony?
Can you repeat the question again?
Yeah, developers say it's very difficult to build housing downtown because the city does not allow enough density and there are height limit restrictions. So we've seen situations where developers have a choice and they build hotels instead. They convert the property to hotels. What would you do as a member of the council to incentivize, to make it easier, to make it more profitable for these developers to say, yes, let's build housing downtown? I think everybody wants affordable housing downtown. The question is, what can you do to actually, as a city, to say, let's make this easier for you to build it?
So I think, you know, knowing people that have tried to open businesses downtown, the city makes it very difficult. There's a lot of red tape. The expense of all the the stuff you have to go through in order to get that door opened. Sometimes it deters people. I know there was plans to put businesses in at the Paseo at the old Macy's, and the red tape, and finally the business owners decided not to open there. So I think reducing red tape is going to be a big part of that. Also, you're talking about the housing, who should live there. Well, I think that would be a great opportunity not only to put housing there, but let's think about not just renters, how about ownership? You know, I have a friend that lives in Goleta. They make $25,000 a year, and yet they own a condo. They are set. He's had it for 15 years, and he's paying on it, and it's going to be his family's wealth later on down the line. So maybe we can work a compromise out with people to find, if we're going to do low housing, let's do low housing ownership, give people a chance to have equity, because I know I don't have it in a home. So the thing is I would like to have an opportunity to do that, you know. So I know other people, if they're hard workers just like I am, they have families, they're putting money aside when they can. But if renting is all the future they have, I think we're kidding ourselves. This city's never going to change. But if you can put some equity, give them a chance to have something, and their kids can have something down the line, that's generational. That's what we're looking for. When we think about 100 years down the line, right? It's going to be ownership, not renting, that's going to be saving the city.
Okay, fair enough. We've got about 15 minutes left, and I'm going to just ask you to shorten your answers just a little bit, particularly on these next two questions, which are yes or no. So give me 30 seconds after the yes or no. First, do you think all 8 blocks of the current promenade should remain closed to cars? Oscar?
I'm willing to come to a compromise about that, but for the most part, yes.
All right. Tony?
No. Like I said before, I've worked down there. I've seen, the city thrive, and I've been part of, celebrations down there that were amazing. During fiestas, I still have a booth at De La Guerra Plaza. We sell taquitos and guacamole. Best in the world, by the way. So, but the thing is,
parking.
yeah.
Okay.
So the idea is, to create interaction, and if it's closed, you're getting rid of a demographic of people. I know a lot of people that I grew up with do not go to State Street. Why? Because they're worried about getting their kids run over by bicycles. They're worried about safety. Not enough police patrolling down there. And so this is not something that just happened. This is a long time thing that's been happening with our city government. They neglect the downtown area, and so the locals don't go there. Well, who do you think is going to be spending most of the money? The locals.
All right. Another yes or no question with a quick explanation. Do you support or oppose a moratorium on construction of new hotels in Santa Barbara? Tony, you're first this time.
Well, I don't know enough about it, but if I just had to shoot from the hip right now, I'd say probably, the market's going to determine, if you can't open up 12 karate schools and expect all of them to do well, right? So the market determines the success of that. So I think for us to establish a moratorium on something that may establish itself, I think we're part of a free market. We're not part of a control type of government. So I think we need to let things happen the way they happen. And if they don't have success, then maybe that is going to be the next apartment building that gets turned into housing like they did in Goleta. You know what I mean? Where it turns into an advantage. So.
All right, I'm going to count that as a big no. Oscar?
Yes, I believe that we're facing a housing crisis, and the market already spoken. There's a downturn in hotel uses, and to the point where the hotels are having an issue housing their staff, and they're actually using those hotel rooms to house their staff to work the hotels that are not being used as is now. So I'm against building new ones. We need to build more housing.
All right. And then one more quick yes or no. Are you for or against the proposed 1/2 cent sales tax increase on the November ballot, and why? Oscar?
Yes, because we're facing a deficit. If we pass this sales tax, we'll be able to address that deficit significantly and also have a surplus to then invest in other areas of the city and programs. It's going to go to support our first responders, to support our parks, and making sure that our businesses can be thriving. And this is an important point that I want everyone to make sure they hear, that if we don't take advantage of passing this tax, now specifically that it's benefiting the city alone, just the city, then we run the risk of the county or the state passing a tax in our city, and then all that money goes to the state or the county, as opposed to this tax specifically going to us and only us. So if we don't pass this now, we're gonna lose that, and every cent that we spend is gonna be going to the state and the county. So don't let this opportunity pass you by. Make sure you support it.
All right, Tony, yes or no?
So this is the issue with our government right now, with our council. Our council is that how are first responders not number one on the list? Why are we worried about them? They should be number one. Our police, our fire, they should be number one. They should never be an issue. And if we're spending incorrectly, if we're not being fiscally responsible, as a businessman, I can't do that. You know, I buried myself in a hole trying to stay open during COVID because the city shut me down. You know, and so I'm digging myself out of that hole. But as the government, it's a different. You have a bigger responsibility. All of our tax dollars go in there, and if you can't be responsible enough to control that, and then threaten with public safety first, that's ridiculous. That should be number one. Should be taken care of. Our kids' schools, all the stuff that's important should be number one, and everything else should fall into place. We shouldn't be spending millions of dollars on a bike trail that hardly anybody uses.
So yes or no on the?
That would definitely be a no.
No. Okay. Thank you. All right. I just we got two questions we're going to ask you individually. Oscar, if you win a new term, you'll be set to have sat on the council for 9 years. As you've stated, you're well known for being out and about and for being responsive to constituents. But as a governance matter, can you identify one issue on which you've had real impact?
Yeah, absolutely. So when it came to, I'll give you a couple. So when it came to the city having more transparency and communication with the residents, I pushed since day one that I was elected to build have the city provide a reporting app that the residents can use to report any issues they come across in the city, so that they can immediately contact city staff about whatever issue they've come across and have it quickly addressed. So that was something huge that I was passionate about, and I got to make happen. The other one I was really passionate about is protecting our residents' First Amendment rights when it comes to city council meetings, because there have been multiple mayors that had tried to change the way that the public gets to speak to us, and I opposed it and fought and made sure that people's right to speak in public at meetings was preserved.
Are you talking about allowing Zoom comment as well as not shortening the amount of time people can talk?
That's correct.
Okay. All right, so Tony, we have a question for you. As discussed in my interview of you for my story, you've been living outside of the district, and we know that you have a very successful business on the west side on San Andres Street. But you moved out of the district and you recently moved back in. So can you address that and talk about that? Are you moving back because you want to run? How can people who don't know you, who haven't been in your dojo, accept and believe that you're really most concerned about what's happening on the west side if you've been living in Buellton and other places most recently?
Well, look, this is kind of like a city thing, right? What's the real issues? We're talking about where I live. I live on the west side. I have a place on the west side. Whether I have, I've been there the whole time, but I grew up on I was born on Figueroa Street. I lived on Figueroa for 12 years. I lived on Islay. I've been part of the community for a long time. My business has been there for 28 years. I deal with the community every single day. I get there at 8 o'clock in the morning at my business, and I'm normally there till 8:30, 9 o'clock at night. So, I've been trying to get back to Santa Barbara. By the way, I got kicked out during COVID. I had a landlord decided he wanted to move his kid into my house, and I couldn't find a place because everybody was moving in from LA who's working remotely, and there was an option of a, 2-bedroom for $5,000, and it didn't work for my family of 5 of us, So the idea is that, you know, I'm fully vested in here. I own the building that I have my business in, so that's my future right there. I don't make a lot of money, like I said, a third. Right now, I'm digging myself out of the hole right now. But so the thing is that I'm invested in the community. I have ownership on the West Side. I want to see the West Side thrive. It's not about 100%, about promising to make changes when you've been elected for the last 6 years, and it's about making things happen now. I'm a leader. I've always been a fighter. I'm a multi-time national champion, and I didn't get there by myself. I got there by having good training partners, people that were critiquing me, people that were boosting me forward. And so I want to be able to be that person for the community. You can come to me. We'll figure out a way. I used to wear the shirt. You said problem solver. I want to solve some problems. I don't want to just watch people manage programs, show up to events, and no offense, but show up to events just to be at an event. We have more nonprofits than anybody in the country. Why aren't we using these resources to help fund things that we need around the town? We're neglecting our kids that were hurt during COVID, that didn't get good educations, but they were allowed to graduate. What are they doing now? They're lost. They don't feel like they can go to City College. So let's give them some vocational training to get them to the next level. I have a lot of ideas, and I know there's people in the community, because I run another nonprofit that, again, we're able to come together to make things happen. That's what I'm going to bring to the table. I'm going to bring that leadership idea. The life skills of being a business owner. That's what I'm going to bring to the city to help the West Side improve the overall community.
Thank you, Tony. Okay, one more question, and then we'll go to closing statements. In the last 5 years, the state of California has spent $24 billion on homelessness programs, and the unhoused population has increased by 50,000 statewide. In Santa Barbara County last year, total spending on homelessness was $112 million, and the unhoused population increased 12%. What is wrong with our policies? Oscar?
I believe it's pretty short-sighted to blame the government for an issue that's going to require a multifaceted approach. Like, the saying, it takes a village to raise a child. Well, in my eyes, these are all children, and it takes an entire village, not just the government. So I went out and I had a joint meeting with a gathering, I guess you can say a congregation of local religious leaders, and I asked them, according to your belief system, you as well should be helping us address this issue. How can we work together? And because of that meeting, a few of those institutions allowed safe parking to happen in their locations, and also give clothing, food, things like that. So again, I don't think that this is an investment. I don't think it's a bad investment. Ultimately, the government's there to help people, and that's what we're doing. And I believe housing is the answer, so we need to provide more housing.
All right, thank you. Tony?
Repeat the question again?
Sure. In the last 5 years, the state of California state government has spent $24 billion on homelessness program, and the unhoused population has increased by 50,000 statewide. In Santa Barbara County last year, total spending on homelessness was $112 million, and the unhoused population increased 12%. What is wrong with our policies?
Well, I would have to say, administrative issues. If they can't find a solution, that means people aren't coming together enough to make it happen. I think, as a community, we should be more in charge of what's happening locally, not the state. The state doesn't know what's happening in our city per se exactly, but they're passing rules for everybody, So what we need to do is take more ownership of that. And if we do that, then we're going to solve the local problems, and I think, mental health is probably the biggest problem, So if we're not addressing mental health, if we're not addressing drug addiction, I'm not saying vilify these people, but get them the help they need. And sometimes that means you have to take them in, to help them from themselves. So I think, if we look at it from a local standpoint, and I know, this community is incredible for coming together to making things happen. So it's just a matter of putting resources together. I know as a kid, my church, we were always out feeding the homeless. We were always giving out clothes. We always had a pantry at my church. So, so a lot of churches do that already, So I know that's already there. We just got to make it more local and take control of it and not depend on the state to have the final say on how things are done.
All right. Well, okay. Thank you both for a really interesting and enlightening and substantive conversation. I appreciate you being responsive to the questions, which doesn't always happen. So now I'll give you each 2 minutes for a closing statement. Tony, you go first.
Well, the reason I'm running, again, it started off with the business district that I'm in, but it really comes down to this. I'm about the community. I want to make sure that the community is going to thrive. I'm about small business. I want small business to be the cornerstone of Santa Barbara. I've helped many people start their own businesses because I know that they get stuck at a certain pay wage, but if they can start their own business, then they can have financial freedom if they work it the right way. So having programs is going to be important for us. Youth programs. Like I said, there was a whole demographic of kids that just didn't get educated very well. So we need to find some type of programs for them. So it's going to be about spending money in our own community with the most in need. And again, we're talking about housing. We're talking about, just having an opportunity to get ahead, to have an opportunity to stay in Santa Barbara in the long term. And I think with the leadership that I have, I think I can push us in that direction. And I'm willing to work with the other council members to make things happen. You have to compromise. I get that. I mean, being the youngest of 12, I learned how to compromise real quick. Don't beat me up. I'll make you pancakes. I got it. So we can figure this out, but we just got to have that mindset. And when that happens, I think change happens.
All right, Oscar, last word.
Thank you. So I just want to ask again for the support of my district to continue serving you like no other council member ever has in the history of our community. Again, I want to reach out to multiple different organizations like I have been to address these issues. I've reached out to the school district to have them open up the West Side school campuses to the public so that they could have open, safe play areas. I reached out to our state senator so we could streamline the business permit application so people can have businesses in the city. I've reached out to my congressman so that we can work with UCSB to open up a new community center on the Harding School Elementary that'll be open to everyone in the city, not just the West Side. So please continue to support me so I can support your housing needs. I've voted consistently in support of tenants' rights, and I will, you're voting for somebody who's been consistent. I've lived here my whole life. I've voted in agreement with the public, and I want to continue doing that.
All right, thank you. It's been an incredible evening. Thank you so much for participating. Thanks to everybody here in attendance, as well as everybody watching on the live streams. And I have to say, it's just an amazing day to see such qualified, talented 4 Mexican-American candidates running for office. And I think the people who are envisioning district elections were envisioning a moment like this. And all of you should be proud, even District 1, this contest, for putting yourself out there. And thank you so much. And we know that everyone's more informed because of this forum. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. Thank you, Josh.
Thank you.